some people are losing their minds in the current real estate market. And it's too big of a reaction, in my opinion, for what has been a slight adjustment. Now, some markets, I've seen some markets have price drops of up to 18 to 20% in some metro markets across the U.S., but that's on kind of the most extreme end of the market. What I'm talking about in, say, our local market here is where we've seen an increase in inventory, and people are not used to that and what that means for sellers. And so I've had conversation after conversation the last 2 weeks of a ton of consultations with sellers who have called me and said, hey, my house didn't sell the first time I was listed. I was listed with another firm and it didn't sell, or it's not selling. What are we going to do about that? And so when there is a slight shift in the market, the first thing that I tell people, and the hard part is they haven't seen this in approximately 7 years, 7 to 10 years in some market. And so people have completely readjusted their expectations. And so the very first thing, the hardest part of the conversation that I have with people is that the very first thing that we have to do is reset your expectations for what happens in a market that actually has inventory for buyers to look at. So the first thing that happens in a lot of these calls we get, and these are tough calls, but I love a market like this because I'm used to this. Like I've been in markets like this. And what happens is we get the call where someone is like, hey, I bought my house 2 years ago and I need to sell it. Immediately, red flags go up, radar for me, because in general, in the last 7 years, that has not been a problem. The market is appreciated enough where someone has equity and they can sell. And it depends, though, on how much they put down. So over the last 7 years, people could sell every 2 years. They could buy a house. It would go up in value. They could sell it. They would even have equity. They would make some money. They would trade up and get another house that was bigger. And that was no problem. But in the last year and a half to 2 years, that is not a situation that works for most buyers and sellers. And so the only way that works is if you're a wholesaler, if you're buying something under market and then you are putting in some sweat equity or making some major improvements that you did. That's likely the only category of people that can kind of make that work in that situation. And what I mean by wholesaler is somebody that's not just an average Joe buyer that's going out and buying a house that's listed with an agent or buying a house from a production builder. Heck, in the last 7 years, you could buy houses from production builders, not even know anything about investing or what you were doing, and then 2 years later sell it for a profit. Well, if that's the situation you're looking for now, my first question is, do you need to sell this house? Or do you want to sell your house? And so, that's the first question when someone calls and I find out that they've only owned that house for, a couple years. And so what do I mean by that? And some people are like, well, do you really have to define that, Lance? But sometimes we do in that situation. So a lot of things we deal with in the have to category is someone maybe went through a divorce and it was a court-ordered sale. A lot of times they'll ask one or the other parties could buy out the other party. And in the last 7 years, prior to the last year and a half, almost 9 times out of 10, that other spouse party could refinance, have a payment that was affordable, and then buy the equity out of the other partner. And so what happens now is they're looking at mortgages where they had rates at 3% or less. And if they refinance at 6%, they look at that payment and they're like, hey, I can't, my debt to income ratio is too high. It doesn't support it. So I can't do it. So the only way they can do it to clear the debt and the mortgage off both parties' names is to go through a sale. So that's a big one that we see. Estate sales are another big one where a lot of times in the last 7 years, you saw family members that would just pick up the house as a rental. Or they would sell it to somebody in the family and they would get a mortgage. They might even give them a little bit of a deal. But now with rates where they are, it's not as attractive to a lot of family members. And so we come across a ton of estate sales. We help a lot of people get houses cleaned out, get ready for that. Shoot, we even had one last week where, I mean, shocker, the things I get to see in real estate, there was half an airplane in a garage.
Oh.
And it was an estate sale where the guy had passed away, and then it's like there's a half-built airplane. I mean, and I wasn't near the airport or anything. So you don't expect to see those things, but it takes a little bit of work to get those ready. So that's another one where people are like, hey, we got to get this cleaned out, get them sold.
Yeah.
Job transfers are the other ones, and where they're just like, hey, I was not expecting to get transferred, or I was not expecting to have to do return to office work. And so now I have to sell and move in that situation. And even in those situations, sometimes they can look at renting. But I'm getting more and more inquiries from people in our rental company who are like, man, I'm just going to rent this for a couple of years until I see the rates either go down or prices go up. And so we can talk a little bit about that. But so that's the very first question that we're going after. Is this a need or want to? And then if it's a need and you have to, the very first thing that we go to look at is comparables. What are the comparables doing? And I got to tell you, I hear so many times where people are like, there are no comps for my house, Lance. Like mine has this special orientation that the builder only did for me. I used some imported quartz from the mines of Papua New Guinea that no one else has. So there's no comp for my house, Lance. Yeah. And so, and they never want to hear this, but I'm like, there is always a comp, but we have to look at things a little bit differently. Now, when the market was just raging and money was practically free, people would ignore the comps, and that was a thing. But in the market that has shifted slightly, you have to look at the comps. And so if you can't find the comp that is exactly like your house, what you have to do is you have to look at a band of pricing. So it's a little bit harder and it takes a lot more research. But what I mean by that is if you think the range that you want to be in is, say, 650,000, well, then we have to look at what were the last 20 sales
in that
at
price
650,000 or 640 to 660. And what did people get for that? And so, but what you run into with that scenario is, were they in different cities? Were they on, did they have different orientations? Did they back up to a busy street?
Yeah.
So it's a much harder calculation, but there is a comp. You just have to do more work to get to it. So John, I'm going to make you participate a little bit.
Okay.
Because I've got an example for you. Before the break, we talked about people finding comparables.
Yeah.
And in housing, sometimes they struggle with that concept a little bit. And so we had mentioned that there is always a comparable, but what Lance Kenmore says is you just don't want to look at it. So there's got to be one, but you just don't want to look at it. So I want to walk you through a typical shopping scenario that more people are used to, and that's with cars or autos. So,
okay,
John, you're a truck guy, so let's say you're truck shopping.
All right,
I got 2 trucks for you.
Okay,
they're both used. One's over at McCurley, one's over at Corwin.
All right,
they came in on trades. They're both 2022 white Chevrolet 4-wheel drive trucks.
Okay,
same year. Same mileage.
Okay.
Both trucks are priced at $40,000.
Okay.
But one of the trucks, the one at Corwin, has upgraded wheels. They installed automatic steps on it.
All right.
And they upgraded to a 3-year extended warranty. That's the one at Corwin.
Okay.
They're both priced at $40,000.
Okay.
which one do you buy? The one at McCurley or the one at Corwin?
Duh, the one at Corwin.
Right, because you're getting what?
More. You're getting, I don't got to go drop $1,000 on some wheels.
Yep.
Did they say anything about a lift kit?
now you're just being picky.
Okay.
But
are they crew cabs?
Yes.
Okay.
But you nailed it. You're right. They're at the same price, but one has more features and benefits
that you don't have to spend money on.
Now, here's where people start to have a hard time equating this to homes.
Okay.
Now, the one at McCurley, they dropped the price from $40,000 to $32,000.
Oh.
Now, which one do you buy?
I'm going to get the McCurley because then I can use the difference to put the wheels on and do some stuff.
Yeah, just exactly the way you want it.
Yes.
Okay, and it's interesting because what people have a hard time explaining, the reason why I use that example is that this is exactly how people shop for homes. Now, John, the other thing as a consumer in that scenario that never came up, that you never asked me as a buyer. You never asked me how much McCurley or Corwin paid for each of those trucks in a trade-in.
Oh.
Why didn't you ask me that? As a buyer, as the consumer, why didn't you ask me that?
It just never crossed my mind.
Yeah, because you don't care, right? Like, I mean, what do you care as the buyer, right? Because you're just looking for a market price.
Yes.
And so a lot of people make that mistake in housing in a changing market where they come up and they say, well, you know what? This is what I paid for it, or I paid X. And in a lot of cases, it's not that I don't care about that, but you know what? The market doesn't care. And so that's really, really hard in situations because sometimes people might have slightly overpaid or they over improved a house and we can't get, they'll add everything up. They'll be like, well, you know what? I just got that job transfer, returned to work. I have to move back to Tennessee. I've been here with my family. So I paid $400 for the house, Lance, and then I put $100,000 swimming pool in. So that's $400, $500, and then I need to cover the excise tax and escrow and everything. So we should for sure list it at $535.
Okay.
And they interview 3 agents, and 2 of them say, "Yep, I totally understand. That's what we should do." And then the house ends up not selling, right? Because that input cost for those items does not necessarily equate to what the market price, resale price is for the house.
Yeah.
And so you have to have that conversation. And it's a factor. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, there is a factor that goes into that we can use in pricing, but it cannot be the biggest factor. And a lot of times that is like an emotional situation that people are in, and they try to make that the biggest component of pricing, and it's a big mistake in a shifting market or where the market has changed. So that is how
that has to do with
consumer shop.
When you add a front door, it adds value to the home. When you add new windows, it adds. But if you add a pool, that doesn't necessarily add value.
Yeah, and if it does, it's probably not an equation where it's 100%. And so if we take that truck example like you and I just talked about, and we have 2 houses that are very, very identical at $400,000. They have 3 bedrooms. They have 2 baths. They both have 2-car garages. But you know what? One of them has granite counters, just like we talked about a truck having wheels. One of them has granite counters. One of them has better landscaping. And one of them added a covered porch out back. And so you look at that and you say, and you look at the comps, and the comps all come in at 400. Well, like the example we used, if you price it at 400, you now have more features and benefits, and you're likely going to sell. If you price it at 420, because you did all of that stuff, and they have another option at 400, they're likely going to go to the one that's 400 and do exactly what John said. Put the wheels and tires on that they want, put the covered patio on that, do it exactly how they want it. And so it works exactly the same way in housing, but it's harder for people to look at that when they become emotionally attached to the house. So one of the biggest value adds that we bring as realtors is coming in and talking about that from a non-emotional perspective, and then helping people see that in the situations. And you know, it's a very difficult thing to do. In fact, I think some people would be surprised to know. I mean, when I buy houses sometimes and flip houses and stuff myself, I'll go work on a house for 2 or 3 months and get it fixed up and ready to go. And a lot of times I'll have another agent in my office, come double check my pricing. Because even me who does it hundreds and thousands of times, in that 2 to 3 months when I mowed the lawn at that flip house and I painted that door myself and I did it myself, there are times where like I become emotionally attached to the house. I'm like, God, I got to have somebody on my team come bring me back to reality. So even if that's someone's profession, it can still happen in those certain situations. The other thing that happens is that you need to use the examples of homes that didn't sell. Like sometimes you can learn as much from the ones that didn't sell as you can from the comps that did. And so you can pull those up and see, gosh, I thought there were 2 houses in that cul-de-sac that had expired and they didn't sell. That's strange. I wonder why. And so you dig into those details and you look and you see, gosh, it looks like everything I'm seeing, they started $60,000 too high. And so then they were on the market for 3 months. They never reduced. And okay, now I see what happened. That wasn't the right price. Yeah. And so you can look and see to kind of bracket how high you can go. You can learn almost as much from the houses that did not sell. Then the last thing that I put down that people need to pay attention to in a higher inventory market, and that is looking at price ranges, bands of houses in different price ranges. What I mean by that is if, say, there is a band of pricing from $400,000 to $450,000, you don't want to be the worst house in that range. Like you'll be dead in the water. Like if there's 10 to choose from, it won't sell if you're in that range and you're the worst price houses. So like a good example that I give people sometimes is if you have a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house, 4-bed, 2-bath, price it like the nicest 3-bed, 2-bath. Okay, so now people are going to look and say like, oh man, this 3-bed, 2-bath is really, really nice. But you got it. Wow, you're telling me I could get a 4th bed if I go over and look at this one 2 blocks over and it's the same price? Okay, so now you're now the best priced, 4th bedroom house. So what you did is you put yourself in a band and a range that is not necessarily congruent with the features and benefits you have. So that's a little trick that you can look at. Same thing like if you're 3-bed, 2-bath, and not a lot of 3-bed, 2-baths get built with 3-car garages. I mean, some do, but a lot of times you see a typical 3-bed, 2-bath, 2-car garage. But if you have a 3-car garage with a 3-bed, 2-bath, go find the nicest 3-bed, 2-bath that only has 2-car garage, and don't price a little bit more than that house. Price the same as that house. Ooh. And then you're going to get the traffic, and then that house is going to sell. So when a market is increasing in inventory and these choices are out there, a lot of times the number one mistake is people don't look at the features and benefits for the same pricing. And so I basically showed you 3 different ways that come back to the same summary. More features and benefits in that band of pricing. And then the last thing that I mentioned is I was going to ask you, John, another very, very important real estate question. And that is, when you buy milk at the grocery store, do you just grab it, or do you ever check the expiration?
I check the date.
like every time. Every time.
Yes.
Okay. Buyers do the same thing with days on the market. They check the days on the market every single time. And so don't be afraid if you miss the mark a little bit or the market shifted on you to talk to your agent about making an adjustment. Say it's and sooner rather than later. Like if you're in that 30-day mark, you'll be able to talk about those things and know. So good. I knew that the most important real estate question today was if you checked the expiration on your milk.
Yes.
And I'm just gonna wrap up
And
the
yogurt.
show. I'm just gonna wrap up the show with that. That is it. That is the most important real estate question today. Thanks for listening to us, everybody. Have an absolutely great rest of your weekend. And if I'm not mistaken, it's Fair Week.
Yep.
Yeah, coming up. And so I look forward to seeing a bunch of our listeners out there and hanging out there and seeing everybody out at a great Tri-Cities event. So I will see you out there.